Welcome to week 2 of Ethne. Updates? What have you got to update for us this week?
All right. Well, so last week had a couple of pretty cool things happen. Spent an evening in Los Angeles with an organization called Transformation Ministries. They're a church planting organization, and I got to know some of the other church planting pastors and the leadership of the organization. The bottom line is, Joanne and I are going to be going to a church planting assessment. So where they look at us and say, determine whether we are church planter material. And so that's the first step in this process, but a possibility that we'll be partnering with Transformation Ministries, which could really help out the launch of Ethne. The second thing, I'm pretty excited about this. We still don't know. It's still very, very early, but on on Saturday, tomorrow, I'm meeting with a co-pastor at a church in Lemon Grove. This church is a Hispanic church. They meet at 12 o'clock on a beautiful campus with a great facility, and they're upgrading this entire facility, and they're looking for an English-speaking church to populate the property early in the morning, say from 7-ish to 11 o'clock in the morning. They're leaving that space open for a church like ours to rent. So very possible we might have a location at the turn of the year. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yes, definitely.
So, yeah. And that came as a result, really, of just being in Lemon Grove.
Okay.
So, and speaking about being in the right place at the right time, you've got a little story about that, don't you?
I do. It's actually how I met my fiance.
Yeah?
Nicole's birthday was happening, and it's the first time in forever that her sister and her parents were out of town, and she was planning on going to a concert. Nobody had, all her friends had bailed for her. She asked me to go if I couldn't make her birthday party, and went to see a music show with one of my friends, and ended up meeting my fiance there.
Wow. So you didn't plan on this at all?
No, not at all.
So all you did really was just show up, and you were there?
Yes.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Now, were you scared at all?
Yes.
Yes.
Of course I was scared.
You're scared?
You're always scared of that first step.
Yeah.
So how are you scared with starting Ethne? It's a new location. What are your fears?
Well, I'm not the kind of person who embraces fear too much. But I know that there are things that make me nervous, and there are things that make Joanne nervous for sure. We're putting our whole livelihood on the line for this. So am I going to get a paycheck? Things like that. Those are very real concerns, I think. But just as a church, I think our entire group, the core group, the committed group, there are some concerns, some fears. And, some of those fears might be something like, we're going into a new place with people we've never met before, which means we're probably going to have to start talking to people that we don't know.
Right, it's a new place, there's new people to meet.
Yeah.
It's essentially you're talking to a stranger.
Yeah. So that's kind of scary. And another thing is as a group of people, we're trying to do something here. We're going to attempt to do something that's pretty spectacular. So the bar's set pretty high, And what does it mean to be successful in that? Is it 100 people, 200 people, 300 people? What does that look like? And I think a part of this is we can carry a complete fear of failure. What happens if we go all in on this thing and it ends up not happening at all? Or, and I don't know if this is better or worse, what if we go all in on this thing and we're not successful, but we don't fail either? We end up just kind of maintaining a mediocre presence in Lemon Grove. I don't know if that's better than failure. I might want to fail spectacularly than succeed in a mediocre way. So that's a fear. Another fear is want to be all in on this, but my hands are full.
You still have a family you have to be with. You
Right.
You have daughters, you have grandchildren, you have a wife.
Yeah, and not just me, but other people. You're getting married
Right.
in a little bit. Other people are, got their lives going on, sports and just all these things that we got to carry with us. And we talked a little bit about that last week, but it's still a concern. It's still a fear. How do we handle all the stuff in our life and do this? So fear is a big part of what we're going into, and I think we need to talk about that a little bit.
How has God shown us in the Bible how to deal with something like this?
Well, that's a good question. Last week we were in the first chapter of Joshua, and I want to stay there for a little while because they were facing some things that are very similar to what we're facing. And now Joshua is right up on the edge of the promised land with the nation of Israel, but it's not the first time they were there. 40 years prior to that, they were right in the same place, ready to go in, and they did not do it. So they were facing some fears, and they knew God was there. But what they also were convinced of is that the giants that they were going to face in the land were bigger than the God that had led them there. That's what they were. That's what their belief was. Is that, hey, God told us to go here. We know it's the promised land, but the challenges in front of us are bigger than the God who brought us here.
The challenges we see might be bigger than the belief of something that we haven't seen.
Right. Exactly.
It's a test of belief.
Right. And the interesting thing is that they had seen God. He had split the Red Sea for them. They'd walked through that. He'd conquered Pharaoh's armies. They didn't have to deal with that. He'd done all those miracles before they left Egypt, and he fed them. He fed them in the desert, and he appeared to them on Mount Sinai. So they had experienced God, just like we've experienced God in our lives. So they had an experience of God, but that experience of God wasn't enough to push them in to the promised land. And as a consequence, they ended up walking around the desert for 40 years until God was sure that those who did not have faith were no longer a part of the population. Yeah. So now in the book of Joshua, they're on the edge of the promised land again. And this is what God says to Joshua. This is so powerful. And I think we can use this in what we're doing at Ethne. So God says something to Joshua that really helps take him and the nation cross that line of faith. And this is what he shares with them. He says, I promise you what I promised Moses. So Joshua is not living on his own promises. He's living on the promises that God gave Moses. But here's the promise. He says this, wherever you set your foot, you will be on land I have given you. From the Negev wilderness in the south to Lebanon, and he goes through all these places where he's talking about if Joshua puts his foot in those places, that's the land that God gives him. And then in verse 5, he says this, no one, almost no one, no. He says, no one will be able to stand against you as long as you live, for I will be with you as I was with Moses. And this is key. I will not fail you or abandon you. That's what God says. I will not fail you or abandon you. So inside this statement that God gives Joshua is this very, very real principle. And I think if we grab a hold of this principle, Ethne is going to be able to conquer the promised land that we've been given. And that principle is this. Everywhere we put our feet, that's the ground that God gives us. Everywhere we put our feet, that's the ground that God gives us. Now, what that means really is, just like all you had to do was show up, right, and you got a wife, almost. Now, you didn't expect that, but by showing up, you created an opportunity that you didn't know was there.
Right.
And so the principle of the foot on the land is this, that our physical presence creates spiritual opportunities. So we need to think about how are we going to be physically present in the area that God's calling us to, so that God can create some spiritual opportunities for us.
So us as the core group, what is the best way for us to put our foot there?
That's a good question. What I've been doing for the last month or so, a little bit more than a month now, is anytime I've got any kind of business to do, I do it in Lemon Grove. Okay. Now, it takes a little bit more time. I understand that. I totally get that. It takes a little bit more time. But when I go for coffee, if I have that time, or if I can make that time, I go to the Starbucks in Lemon Grove. I've got a Starbucks that is a mile away from my house, and I will not go to that Starbucks if I don't have to. And you know, if you're like me, sometimes you have to get coffee, but I won't. If I can make it happen in Lemon Grove, I make it happen.
And you set aside other things, the convenience factor,
exactly,
to make that happen.
That's exactly it. And so, if I've got to pick up something at the store, I will go to Lemon Grove to do that. Later on today, I'm going to pick up some coax cable from Home Depot. I got a Home Depot 2 miles from my house. I'm going to drive by that Home Depot. I'm going to go to Lemon Grove, and I'm going to buy the coax cable in Lemon Grove. When I opened the bank account for Ethne, there's a Union Bank in Santee near my house, but I didn't open it there. I opened it in the Lemon Grove branch. So how we as a core team operationalize this, wherever I put my foot, that's the ground God gives you, is to just basically do this. If there's something you need to do it in Lemon Grove. Do it in Lemon Grove. If you're going to the park with your kids, take your kids to a park in Lemon Grove. There are like 5 great parks in Lemon Grove you can take your kids to.
Preferable, sizable ones.
Yeah.
There's actually one called Lemon Grove Park.
Yes, there is. And there's a dog park in Lemon Grove. So if you got dogs, you want to take dogs, you can do that. So just start thinking about what are some things that I do every week, and where do I go every week? And instead of going where you normally go, you go and you be in Lemon Grove. So, and I believe that God will create spiritual opportunities as we do that. Now, before you go, here's the first step. Pray. Pray about going. Say, okay, God, I'm going to go put my foot where you want me to. And I'm praying, Lord, that you will give me the ground that I put my foot on. Okay. And God, I'm praying that you're going to open up a spiritual opportunity because of my presence. Our physical presence creates spiritual opportunities. So that's what we want to do, is just create those spiritual opportunities by being physically present.
What does it look like? How have you applied this, and what results have you found?
So I was so excited. Just a couple of days ago, I started out my day and I prayed, God, please put someone in front of me that needs prayer. And just today, I want to pray for someone that you put in front of me. And so I went to Lemon Grove for breakfast. I really, this is interesting, I only had about an hour and a half. But I took the time to go to Lemon Grove, and I got out of my car. I was going to go to breakfast. I got out of my car. I'm walking into the little cafe, and there was a person who was kind of doing this with his arm. And so okay, God, is this a person? And I actually passed him and said, God, is that who you want me to pray for? And I really didn't get an answer, but I just felt like, okay, this is where if I'm going to pray for someone, here's an opportunity. So I turned around, I walked up to him, and I said, hey, my name is Bryon. Is there something wrong with your arm or anything? He goes, no, I was just stretching out a little bit. I said, but I think I need to pray for you. Is there anything I can pray about? And he looks at me a little bit shocked, and he says, 2 days ago, my homie died.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, wow. I didn't say that, but inside I'm like, wow. I said, oh yeah, you need prayer. You need some prayer. And so I prayed for him. I prayed for him, and I prayed for the victim's family. And by the time we were done with the prayer, and it wasn't long, he looked up at me and he had some tears in his eyes. He's about 18 years old, probably doesn't have a vibrant prayer life. Okay. But in that moment, he was touched by God's presence, and God's presence was there because I was present in Lemon Grove. And I don't know what God's going to do with that, but I do know this, is that the more we are present and the more we are open to taking those spiritual opportunities. 15 minutes later, I'm sitting down, I'm eating my breakfast, and a person just walks up to me and starts a conversation. And when I asked her what I could pray for, she said this: I want you to pray that God would open my heart to believe that Jesus was born of a virgin.
Is that the first time you've ever had that?
First time that's ever happened in my life. I've had all kinds of prayers that people have asked me for, but that was the first time. And she sat down at my table and we had a deep spiritual conversation about Jesus. And I was able to help her think about the Bible and Jesus in a whole different way. Okay. And so that's what happens. That's what happens. When we make ourselves present, our physical presence creates spiritual opportunities. And so as a church, as Ethne gets into the community, and especially if we've got a new location that's shaping up for us already, and again, I don't want to push that too fast, too far, right. But if God is already giving us a place in Lemon Grove, then we need to have a presence in Lemon Grove.
Okay.
So.
Excellent. So today's reminder: pray, go, pray.
Awesome.
Thank you, Pastor Bryon, for joining us this week.